All right, guys, welcome back. So today we're going to go over something a bit more fundamental. Now, I have been asked quite a few times, what is the term rotation in Pokemon TCG? So that's one of the basic terms which anyone should be familiarized with. Because in Pokemon TCG, rotation doesn't necessarily mean something like how to rotate a specific deck and how to actually play it. No, rotation is actually something completely different. Now, what is rotation in Pokemon TCG Pocket? Let's break it down. Now, as you can see, we're currently here in the standard ranked format, right? So you have different game modes, expanded, standard, and trainer trials. And obviously we have ranked. But in general, there is standard, expanded, and casual formats, basically. So in the standard format, Pokemon TCG uses a so-called set legality system, which is based on regulation marks. These marks are the little letters you see at the bottom of a card. As you can see, there is an I on Mega Lucario. If you check a different card, I do believe, where was it? Let's quickly search for another letter here. Most of these are I anyways. Don't really seem to find anymore. So, all right, okay, Hero's Cape is H. So as you can see, these letters are basically part of the regulation system. So each year, usually around springtime, the oldest regulation mark rotates out of standard. So, for example, let's assume right now is the regulation mark which prevents you to use cards from the letter I, right? That basically means any deck running cards from the letter I will not be legal in standard gameplay modes, right? Those are still playable, like in other gameplay modes, for example, expanded and trainer trials, if they are supported anyways. But they're not banned; they're just rotated out, right? So let's look at some examples. So if standard currently allows F, G, and H, so it's usually a combination of letters. When the rotation happens, for example, the letter F will rotate out and the standard will become G and H, and then a new upcoming letter, for example, I. That's going to be the way a rotation works. And then again, the following year, the rotation happens again. And again, one of the three letters, for example, goes away and another new letter comes back, so to speak. So what this exactly means in Pokemon TCG Live is whenever a rotation happens, it basically means many decks lose key consistency cards, for example. So in the upcoming rotation, we're going to lose, for example, the Super Rod. And some archetypes actually disappear entirely. So it happens a lot of times in the past that specific archetypes from previous sets actually completely disappeared, right? Then sometimes it happens as well that some weak decks suddenly become top tier because the corresponding necessary cards for consistency and so forth are suddenly available again within the standard game mode. Also, the meta slows down or speeds up depending on what rotates. So currently we have the situation that decks like Dragapult and Dusknoir are very dominant. So let's say, for example, there is a ban list incoming which, or not ban list, if there is a rotation incoming which basically limits H, for example, then that means in this format, this deck won't be playable anymore. That basically means the entire Duskull line, which is a hardcore used Pokemon, is going to fall out. For example, right? Even Dragcloak is not going to be usable anymore. So that would be like a case where suddenly a current meta deck is not playable at all anymore, right? Now, you might be wondering, why does Pokemon do a rotation? Now, it's obviously from a viewpoint of the company. It keeps the game fresh. Obviously, there is a way of banning cards too, but yeah, that's an entirely different topic. A rotation keeps the game fresh. It prevents power creep from stacking infinitely. It forces new deck building, right? it promotes also new set sales, because if you take a look, there is quite a few sets available. And obviously there is more to come in the future. So this will always trigger a promoted set sale. And it also avoids massive ban lists, like you have it, for example, in Yu-Gi-Oh! In Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG, you have huge ban lists and semi-ban lists and limited lists and so forth. So this is a way of actually making cards still playable. However, they will only allow it at specific times. So that's very much all the reasons why Pokemon does a rotational system. Because without a rotation or ban lists in general, decks would just accumulate literally power forever. Like, then you will never see different decks. Like, you will literally always see the same decks. So a few more examples now, just to break it a bit more down. Now imagine, right, a deck that relies on a powerful draw support card. For example, Goldango. Goldango will rely on something called, where is it? There it is, Superior Energy Retrieval, which is of the category G. So if, for example, apart from the Superior Energy Retrieval, this deck will also rely on cards like the Energy Surge Pro, right? This is one of the key cards in this deck. Or a key engine Pokemon. For example, needing Genesect EX. Genesect EX will allow us to actually draw the evolutions required for Goldango. Very, very insane setup. So this is like one of those decks which is a primary example of being around for a long time, dominating the meta, having won a lot of tournaments. Now, imagine if those cards rotate out. If suddenly I becomes part of the rotation for the upcoming year, for example, then suddenly Genesect will not be playable in this deck anymore, which basically means the deck has to adopt, has to change. Or if the letter H suddenly comes into rotation, then Energy Surge Pro will not be available anymore. Let me quickly see what was Goldango anyways. Goldango was G. All right, so if G goes out, then obviously Genesect and Goldango is not going to be playable anymore. But if H goes out, that would be a huge blow, because suddenly Superior Energy Retrieval would be usable, but something like Energy Surge Pro is going away. And I believe, yeah, okay, Earthen Vessel is G. But there are cards like, for example, the Super Rod, which is one of those cards which you usually have in a lot of decks. So Super Rod is going away, for example. Where is it? There is. Super Rod is going away, which is of G, right? And if Super Rod was needed in a lot of decks, then that is a hard blow to those decks. So that basically usually means as well that if a rotation happens, you might, if you still want to play a specific setup, then you might have to adopt and add replacements to the deck, which might be even worse, which make the deck less consistent and basically pushes it out of the meta or lets it completely die because it becomes unplayable. But there are instances where decks have lost nothing, right? So there is a few phrases which are, especially around competitive TCG, are very well known. So building something like rotation-proof decks is something any player should always try to adopt. Or investing in safe archetypes. Now, it's definitely nice to have new cards like Frostlass and stuff like that, or running Mega Lucario X, one of my absolute favorites, or running Dragapult Dusknoir, obviously, or even go into Team Rocket with Mewtwo and stuff, right? This is one of my favorite seasons as well. So it's definitely very important to invest in safe archetypes and also try to busy yourself with post-rotation meta predictions. If you manage to see through what the next rotation is going to be, you're then most likely going to be able to prepare even earlier for post-rotation decks. So yeah, to conclude the entire topic of rotation, it's not a new format, right? It's still So even if rotation happens, standard is still standard, expanded is still expanded, and so forth. It's all the same rules, same price structure, same gameplay, just a smaller or different card pool. You can also see this if you're on TCG Live and you're going into your deck building, for example. You can also see when you on the top, for example, filter for expanded mode, suddenly you see, for example, in my case, 975 cards are available to be played. In standard mode, I have only 899 cards. So almost 100 cards are missing from the pool which are allowed in standard, which basically limits quite a few decks. And in general, a simple way to think about it is rotation equals to the oldest chapter of cards leaves standard and we start with a new competitive year. It's basically a seasonal reset for deck building. But yeah, that was everything there is to know about rotation. I hope this helps, especially for newer players out there. A lot of you guys are coming from Pokemon TCG Pocket and have never really gotten grips with Pokemon TCG. So just in case you're wondering how this all works and what to take into considerations, yeah, do let me know down below in the comment sections if you have any questions or any impulses, or if I missed anything, then yeah, I'll be glad to have you call it out. And as always, thanks for tuning in. Take care of yourselves. Until next time.